What's up, guys? Back with another video. It is Sunday, headed up to work for the day before I have a few days off because the Airbnb that I'm working at has an adjacent Airbnb that is going to be rented out for a few days, so I can't be around. So yeah, working a Sunday. It is nice and cold, and we got a nice little snowstorm over the weekend. So, it's New England. It's end of December, and it's nice out to have some snow and stuff. So, anyway, gonna do a little talk today, kind of assessing the political landscape at the moment. It's kind of really, I would say, sort of a unique moment in time in American politics, and I think there's a lot of people that just are, I don't know if we've ever lived through a period where there's been as many people who feel politically homeless and feel like neither mainstream political party represents them anymore. I sure know that I feel that way, despite having some amount of optimism about what this administration could have done, what they could have made their policy on a variety of different things. I did have some optimism at the beginning of Trump's term this time around. Not a ton. I knew that, for instance, the Israel-Gaza policy was going to be bad. Trump is, despite what his supporters say, he is not a peace president. He is not, he campaigns like Ron Paul when it comes to foreign policy. But when it comes down to it, his policies in his first term are what set up the opportunity for the Russia-Ukraine war. Not that that was all his fault, with Russiagate being what it was. I think a lot of his sort of his policy towards Russia in his first term was largely in reaction to being smeared falsely as a Russian agent. And so he tried to portray himself as tough on Russia, whereas he might have otherwise had more diplomatic relationships with Russia. So I'm not saying that's all his fault. Nevertheless, he reacted and let his enemies dictate his policy, which is always the wrong thing to do. And then, he could have withdrew from Afghanistan, but instead he pushed it off and allowed Joe Biden to be the one who actually pulled us out of Afghanistan and let that become the shit show that it became. He could have pulled us more out of the Middle East, more out of all of these foreign conflicts that most Americans don't even know we're in, such as in Somalia, such as still in Iraq. There was a lot of posturing and campaigning as though he was going to be a Ron Paul type when it came to foreign policy, but that was just not the case. And now this administration, it's gotten much worse. He campaigned on ending the Russia-Ukraine war on day one. Never would have happened if I was in office, blah, blah, blah. How's that going? Not so great. Oh, we just sent more money to Ukraine? Just sent more weapons to Ukraine? Yeah, we did. Israel, Gaza, like I said, not a big surprise. Trump is probably the most openly pro-Zionist president in American history. So that's not really a surprise. I would say it's been worse than I was expecting on that front, even because I thought he was at least going to have to sort of kind of have one foot out the door and sort of posture in a different way. But honestly, he's just completely kind of given himself over to just following whatever Bibi wants when it comes to the Middle East. He has done essentially nothing aside from, a couple of ceasefires that continue to be broken. And then he did the whole Iran 12-day war, which is in reality still an ongoing problem where nothing has really been resolved. And, Bibi is calling for more U.S. involvement in striking Iran. No surprise there. So, and then you have the Venezuela problem as well, which, if you know who Marco Rubio, when he got designated as Secretary of State, it's not really surprising that that's his foreign policy pet project. And so this is not all that surprising to me. I think the Trump administration on that foreign policy front is losing a lot of support. He sure has burned a lot of his support with libertarians and non-interventionist right-wingers, Buchananites, all of that. People who want an America first or an American only policy. He's burning a lot of support with those people. And he would have to do something very drastic domestic policy-wise as far as improvement goes in order to win back that support at all. So that's an interesting development. The one front that I do think Trump does have on his side is he closed the border, which was one of the biggest demands of his voter base. So that is a check. You did that part. You followed through. You closed the border. When it comes to deportations, the numbers aren't great. They're actually lower than Biden and Obama administration deportation numbers. It's kind of different when you have a closed border as opposed to when it's open, because if it's open, then obviously you have an easier time in border areas finding recently crossed people to deport. So, but still, the numbers are not great. I would say his base wants much more. And even somebody who's like me, who's not exactly his base, I want the numbers to go up, and I want less of this performative crap and this like the edits and like DHS posting these like videos, montages, like less of that, more on the numbers. But anyway, mixed reviews as far as his base goes on that front. The economy continues to be a sort of question mark, and everybody's kind of waiting for the other foot to drop. I feel like a lot of people kind of understand that we're on the precipice of either like a recession or if things go poorly, like a much larger catastrophe when it comes to the economy. I don't really know what's going to happen with that, but there's a lot of weird stuff going on. The real estate market is kind of wild. Silver and gold prices are pumping crazy, which, if you understand monetary policy at all, it's kind of like, what took you guys so long? But at the same point, this is like a really fast pump. So it's kind of hard to say what's going to happen with that. But I would say, like, the economy, people are kind of just like waiting. Like, nobody really feels much relief at this point. I would say things have been devolving at a slower rate, if anything. So, under Joe Biden, inflation was really bad and really noticeable. Not saying that was all Joe Biden's fault. A lot of that had to do with all the money that was printed in 2020 during Trump's first term at the end, during COVID. So there's a share of blame to go around when it comes to the economy, and not everything affecting the economy today has happened in the last 6 months. Like, a lot of these changes take years and decades for the market to react to. So, I would just say, though, that the average voter does not feel much or any relief when it comes to the economy. And so, when we're sending these big aid packages to Ukraine and Israel, and when, Trump is touting this as the best economy because the S&P 500 is up and stocks are up and GDP growth is up, that none of that helps your average or low income American. Low income Americans do not have strong positions in the S&P 500, and so you touting that as an economic achievement is like really bad optics, because they're like, oh, you're just lying. Even though you could make an argument that stock price numbers going up is beneficial in this sort of overall economic earmarker sense. But if you're telling people that the economy's great, but they don't feel any of it, they're just going to assume you're a liar. And I would say somewhat justifiably so. So I would say that is not a strong point for Trump at the moment. And I would be surprised if at the end of this term of his, because we are only 1 year in, there's a lot of time for things to get worse, for the bubbles to pop, for stock market crashes to occur, for real estate bubbles to pop. All of this stuff could happen in the next 3 years. And so I would predict somewhat very, non-specifically, I would predict that towards the end of Trump's term, the economy will not be a strong selling point of his. And until these bubbles actually pop and there's some recalibration and some forced austerity happens, I would predict that no president will have a strong economy to run on in hindsight until those things happen. So I don't think that's going to be a selling point at the end of his term. I guess time will tell. Maybe I'm wrong on that one, but that would be my prediction. And on the last front, assessing the current Trump administration, the first year of the administration, closing out 2025, I would say that the big problem for this administration, I think more so than anything else, and the thing that's losing him the most support, is that it's very clear to anybody who is not either firmly in Trump's hater camp or firmly in Trump's fan club everybody else, everybody that has some, doesn't have like this allegiance to hating or loving Trump, everyone in that middle range hates the way that the Epstein files stuff has been handled, hates the lack of transparency on all these intel agency issues. Whether that's Epstein, whether that is the Charlie Kirk thing, which is an ongoing situation. Even like, think about like the multiple Trump assassination attempts. We've got no disclosure on any of that stuff. There's like the level of non-transparency and then gaslighting about, oh, well, we're the most transparent. Like, all of that is like garbage, and it's not boding well for the administration that wanted to run on, oh, well, we're draining the swamp. Oh, well, this or that. I think it's going to continue to haunt this administration. I don't really see a way to backpedal from it without, clearing house and just like firing Pam Bondi and Kash Patel. Dan Bongino, I guess, is already on his way out. So that's sort of an interesting... Some people think that he's going to come out and say, oh, well, I had to leave because it was just so bad and I couldn't tell the truth and blah, blah, blah. I think he's lost all credibility at this point. I don't think he's going to be successful back in the podcasting space. That ship has sailed for Dan Bongino. He participated in the various cover-ups, and so I don't think that's going to work out well for him. Also, I just don't think Trump is going to get rid of Bondi or get rid of Kash Patel. I think they've been playing their roles the way that the Trump admin has wanted them to. And so I think they'll be around, probably. And so I think all of those things are kind of the problems for the Trump administration, politically, optically, all of that. He's hemorrhaged support with sort of the independent voters. Last polls I saw, he's down like 40 points with the independents that voted for him. That's really bad. And then there's a bunch of other stuff that just is not good looks, But the other interesting part of it, and we're kind of getting to the point where midterm speculation is going to start taking place. I think Republicans are likely to get destroyed in the midterms. They are likely to lose the House and the Senate. And I would be surprised if once that happens, the impeachment sort of buzz starts happening again. And essentially, even if Trump did want to change course and follow through on some of his campaign promises, at that point, he will pretty much be gridlocked with opposition in the Senate and the House. And so he'll have an excuse to not follow through on any of those things. Do I think that's going to play well with his voter base? No. Is he setting up the likely heir to the Republican sort of presidential nominee, J.D. Vance, pretty poorly by doing that? Yes. Does J.D. Vance have the cojones to go against Trump's policies, especially while Trump is still in office, but even afterwards? Say that the next 4 years kind of continue as they are now, and then JD is hitting the campaign trail. is he going to be able to differentiate himself from Trump without Donald Trump feeling slighted by J.D. Vance kind of calling him out on various policy failures? Unlikely. But that puts J.D. Vance in the position of being like Kamala Harris, and when being asked, what would you do differently from your president, saying nothing. And that is surely a losing answer to give. You cannot just say, oh, I wouldn't do anything different, while the economy kind of stinks, while, deportation numbers are lower than your base wants, while your foreign policy is a disaster. You cannot just kind of say, oh, well, I wouldn't do anything different. That is really bad messaging. So J.D. Vance, to me, seems like he's going to be likely in between a rock and a hard place if he wants to be the nominee. That being said, with all of that being said, all of that criticism on the Trump administration and the Republican Party moving forward, who do the Democrats have? What are their policy proposals? When it comes to the midterms, like I said, I think they will have big wins, likely. However, polling data, to me, as far as I've seen, has shown that despite approval numbers for Trump and the Trump admin going way down, dropping like a rock for the past 5 months or whatever it's been, support for the Democrats in these polls has not risen like it normally does. Because normally you have this situation where, the Republicans do well, people approve of them, low support for the Democrats. Then people get sick of the Republicans, approval ratings for the Republicans go down, and the Democrat numbers shoot up, and vice versa. That's not really happening. I think there's a lot of people like me who are completely anti any of the Democrat politicians or policies. I will not vote for a Democrat because their policy positions are so bad. And culturally, they are everything that I do not want. However, the Republican Party does not represent me well either. They are also pro-big government. They are also pro-socialist policies. They are also pro-military industrial complex interests, foreign interests, and so I think, like I said at the beginning of the video, there is more there are more people that are politically homeless now than there ever have been. Now, does that mean that some third party is going to take that support? Is the Libertarian Party finally going to become an actual thing to be reckoned with? No, I don't think so. Is the Forward Party going to become popular? No, I don't think so. Is some new political party going to spring up and gain popularity? No, I don't think so. So that kind of leaves a couple possibilities. And I would say that the most likely outcome of that is that there's a real chance for outsiders to become sort of like Trump in 2016 or 2015 in the primary election, at the beginning of that primary season, nobody thought Trump would be the nominee, or almost nobody. He was the outsider. He was the dark horse. And he ended up winning because people were so sick of the Washington, D.C. establishment, the uniparty, whatever you want to call it. People were just sick of it. And Donald Trump was essentially a big middle finger to the D.C. establishment and to the intel agencies, to the permanent bureaucracy, to the deep state, whatever you want to call it. I think that the most likely outcome is that there will be some other outsider who gains the support within one, if not both, major political parties. And so, I mean, like, Mondami type figure could gain that support in the Democrat Party. The DNC historically does not like radical leftists, though, so I don't know if that'll actually work out for them, or you'll end up with, I don't know, Pete Buttigieg or Gavin Newsom, AOC. Those are the most likely sort of people. AOC could be marketed as a radical leftist to, the farther left people. However, I think she's very clearly been ingratiated nicely into the establishment. And so that, honestly, at this point, I think AOC is the most likely presidential candidate for the Democrats. Gavin Newsom probably being second. I don't know after that, to be honest. I think their bench is pretty depleted and pretty thin. So those are the two most likely at this point, but there's a lot of green in between here and then. So I guess we'll see. As far as the right wing goes, I think it's a lot more interesting because there's already kind of like this big, people have been calling it a civil war on the right. And the real divide that you can guarantee that people on the right, on the establishment side will feel one way and the non-establishment side will feel the other way. That divide is essentially over the Israel issue, because the Israel issue is really just like a marker for all the other issues that people are against. So DC establishment types will always side with Israel, will always side with the donor base, will always side with foreign interests, with the military industrial complex lobby, with, big business interests, corporate interests. That's where the DC establishment types have always been and will continue to be. And Trump, despite campaigning like he was not that, is very clearly a big, he's in those circles and he's part of it. And he is letting his policy be dictated by the donor base, not the voter base. And then in opposition to that, you have sort of this broad coalition of people on the right who voted for Trump this time and almost unanimously now regret it. And that is, the America First types, which are, like that, and that spans from people like Nick Fuentes, who has been dominating the news cycle recently on the right. And then you have people like the libertarian wing who have, between monetary policy and foreign policy, have abandoned the Trump train. And, everybody in between, like Candace Owens is against the Trump administration at this point. Tucker Carlson is largely opposed to at least Trump's foreign policy, if not many more policy positions. So you kind of have like this broad coalition of people who are non-establishment right-wingers who are disapproving of the current Trump admin trajectory. So somebody could rise from within those ranks to be the front runner, or at least play the foil to J.D. Vance, who is kind of like the heir apparent to the MAGA movement at this point. I think those are kind of what we should be looking at as far as things moving forward, what's going to happen. My optimism for this administration is essentially drained, although I will say that this administration does somewhat react to the pressure of its base. So depending on how loud the base can be against a policy that the Trump administration proposes, you could see backpedaling, and that has happened many times with the Epstein stuff, with the Iran stuff, with other various policies that Trump has kind of floated out to test the waters. He does react to bad reactions to his policies sometimes. So that's kind of my rundown at the moment. Those are kind of the things that I'm watching, and you guys let me know what you think. Let me know where you're at. Let me know who you think might be some of these people that could rise up out of either party and kind of become the non-establishment voice, the disaffected voter base of voice. Those are all kind of the things that I'm interested in right now, the things that I am paying attention to. Anyway, getting to work in a minute, so I will talk to you guys sometime this week. If you got this far in the video, I really appreciate it. Have a good one. I hope you had a good holiday, and talk soon. Later.